I know some people talk about a soul connection with an animal, and I would say I have a very deep connection with my dog now, but this was not immediate. I would say it's like the
Mm.
equivalent of the mom who believes they're going to like fall immediately in love with their child the first time they look in their eyes. And I certainly know many mothers who've had that experience, but I also know the less talked about thing are the mothers that are like, "Who are you, alien creature, and where did you come
Yeah.
from?"
Yeah.
I now believe or feel, if you want to look at things on a cosmic level, that like this is the exact dog that I and we needed, and she's perfect for us and our family. But that was not the case at the time.
This is the Bad Mothers Podcast, where we dive deep into our maternal urges, or lack thereof. We talk about the mothers we left or who left us, and whether they haunt our own choices about having children. I'm kicking off season 2 with a discussion about being a child-free dog mom. How does having a dog, and especially a puppy, help us frame our ideas about motherhood? For me, it's been a tough few months with my new puppy Annie, and I've thought a lot about how she compares with a baby and why I chose one over the other. The perfect person to kick off this conversation is Keltie Maguire, a clarity coach who helps women decide whether motherhood or a child-free path is for them. She's also the host of the Kids Are Child-Free podcast, where she features the stories of people with and without kids to bring new perspectives and insights to those who are on the fence. Originally from Vancouver, Canada, Keltie lives in Munich with her husband Chris and their dog Shira. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. And I will say, like, having a puppy versus adopting and perhaps an older dog, I think are also two different things, which we can maybe talk about.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure. So I'll just quickly introduce this topic because this is the first I plan to have in a short series, maybe 2 or 3 episodes on this topic with other people who have a dog and have sort of wrestled with the baby decision. I've had dogs in the past, but this is my first puppy, Annie, and it's been way more than I anticipated, and she is consuming everything, all my time and focus. And it's really left me wondering if I've totally sabotaged my status as
Mm.
child free, or carefree, the carefree nature that comes with being child free. So that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Since
Okay.
Keltie, you also are child free with a dog. So
Yes.
maybe can you just start by telling me a bit about how you came to your decision to not have children?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I got to share about my dog decision. I guess that comes later.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more exciting and interesting. No, I mean, in short, I grappled with this decision for a very long time. I was under the assumption, like a lot of people, that like it was a someday thing, and I kept pushing it out. I met my now husband when the day after my 27th birthday. Nice hangover alongside me for that meeting. And from the word go, like he seemed like a wonderful man to have or start a family, as far as how we often societally think of family, which my thinking on that's changed. I realized two people can also be a family. But the question or concern was never, do I want to have a child with this person? But it was really like, do I want to have kids at all? And Chris was very much on the fence, probably even like had true ambivalence more so than I did. Whereas for me, I don't think having kids held a really big appeal, but I don't feel like I could properly accept the idea for a long time that I could be child free, and that was okay. I had a lot of guilt and shame around that. So I
Hmm.
basically just pushed the decision down the line for a very long time, probably close to 10 years. I was about 36 or 37 by the time I finally decisively said, okay, no kids for me. Um, and things intensified, of course, as I got older, right? More people around me were having children. I kept hoping or thinking and had been told I would just know what my path forward would be. And of course, the implication being you'll just know that you're ready to have kids and that this is the right thing for you. And so it was probably around age 35 or so that I realized a decision was not, like, in all likelihood, going to magically appear, because the track record suggesting that, like, that hadn't happened yet. And I started thinking more concretely and seriously about what it was, not just that I wanted with this decision, but for my life in general,
Hmm.
how I wanted life to look and feel, what was really important to me. I had to work through, again, as I mentioned, a lot of shame and guilt about not feeling hyper maternal, if you will, at least where it concerns having a human child.
Hmm.
Perhaps we can talk about, maternal feelings and how maybe those have come up or been expressed through other means, like having a dog. And I want to tell you there was like this magical light bulb moment where I just knew that kids weren't for me, but it was really, I think I got far enough along or close enough to that child-free decision that I just thought at this stage, am I really going to backtrack and revisit parenthood? Like it was like I felt like I couldn't find full acceptance in being child-free, but the thought of doing a 180 and then having kids, I didn't see life going that way. So I would
Mm.
say my decision was really a culmination of, the emotional, the practical, like looking at my life to date and the other decisions that I'd made and the various factors that would feed into this decision. And yeah, I guess I'm 43 now, so it's been
Hmm.
a few years or several years of coming to find true confidence in this decision and in recognizing over time that I wasn't the only one grappling with this. That was another big part of this being on the
Yeah.
fence is I felt very lonely. I felt very strange. I felt like there was something wrong with me. Not just because I didn't ultimately want kids, but because I didn't feel super clear about being child free either, which felt like a lot of the portrayals that I was seeing was that women were definitively saying, like, I've never wanted to have children, which is, on both sides of the equation, wonderful for the people who have that sort of decisiveness, but that wasn't my story.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
when I started talking about that ambivalence and uncertainty, and eventually really having to actively make this choice as opposed to feeling like the choice was there, I
Hmm.
realized that a lot of others were struggling with it, and so it's taken me both in a new professional direction as well as
Yeah.
ultimately, I guess this decision culminated in this life path for me.
I'm 43 too.
Okay.
So, yeah, it sounds like we probably have experienced the same sort of, questions
Yeah.
as we age. And, um, you sort of hinted at, being maternal in other ways. And I think that's something, as women probably hear a lot in their
Mm.
30s if they haven't had children yet. People will say, "Oh, but you'd make such a great mother, you're such a
Yeah.
caregiver," that sort of thing. So when you don't feel those those urges to have children,
Yeah.
that can be really difficult to manage, I think. But once you reach our age, people sort of stop asking.
Yeah. It's nice.
And they, yeah, it
I
is.
find
It's
it
been
nice.
such a relief. Like, okay, it's pretty obvious now this isn't going to happen. So,
Yeah.
um, was one of the things that appealed to you about being child free that lack of responsibility for other people?
Yeah.
Because I think that plays a large part in whether you have pets or even are married.
Mm.
When no matter what kind of partnership you have, I mean, I feel like my husband, who's also named Chris,
They're
and
good
I,
ones.
yes, we we've always been very independent
Hmm.
people. And so I've never felt like I had to ask him, oh, do you mind if I'm away this, next weekend or something like that, and vice versa. Whereas once you have a pet, you do have those responsibilities to manage and share. So was that lack of responsibility for others something that contributed to your decision not to have kids?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting how I thought about this idea of having children. And I'm not saying this is the correct way to see it, but I remember anytime I thought about, okay, maybe in 6 months or a year, we'll like think about doing this and trying. And like, I remember I went off the birth control pill at one point, not with the express purpose of starting a family again. I want to be mindful when I use that term, like air
Yeah.
quotes. But just to see, because I'd been on it for so long, how are my cycles? But knowing at the same time, this is something that I might want to do and I wanted to be proactive. And anytime I thought about that future of having a child, having an infant, and raising a child, I don't I want to be mindful about my words because I don't feel like children are or should be a burden, right? They should, I realize there's challenges associated with it, but I feel like people who have kids should want to invest in and have that experience. And for
Right.
me, it was always this like doomsday clock where I was like, oh, I guess I have like 6 more months to do the things I want. I guess I have 12 more months to do the things I want. And I feel very confident now that if I would have had kids, I definitely like I never thought back then, and I certainly don't think now that I would be a parent where my sole life and focus and occupation is my children. I always know and believe I would be someone to have other interests. But yeah, it was just I think it was perhaps telling, and of course hindsight's 2020, but looking back, like
Mm,
how much that responsibility really did feel like the end of my life in a way.
mm, mhm,
And even saying, I said to my husband just a couple of days ago, I'm helping a friend with our plants, and it's like not a big deal at all. Like they live 5 minutes away. I'm happy to help friends out, but at the same time, I have this feeling like I don't want to be responsible for or have to. It makes me sound kind of cold, but like
mm.
I don't know. I feel like I'm good at being an emotional support for people in a sense, but like the doing for other people, it's somehow can grate me. And him and I had this conversation because I said, do you feel the same way? And he's like, well, not at all. Like this is what it is to be human as far as we support and are supported. And that same
Mm,
weekend that I'm like rushing to water my friend's plants before we go out of town, I've got a friend who's helping take care of our dog, and I have a huge amount of gratitude for that. But I guess it was just a reflection for me of how much I've always had my backup about like having to care for or be responsible for to someone else. And I'd
mhm,
love to tell you, I know this is a bad mother's podcast, I'd love to tell you it's because from a young age, I've always had like an unfair burden of responsibility in my family. And that's not the case. I mean, I said to Chris, like, you'd think I was a total princess who was raised not having to do anything. And that's not true either. Like, I've always had responsibilities. I've always had a great deal of discipline, especially where it concerns my own pursuits. But there is something that, like, for whatever reason, kind of bothers me about having to have responsibility to someone or
mm.
something else.
That's so interesting because I've been writing about that this week, actually,
Yeah.
how I have been working on this um, reaction I have to anyone who expresses any neediness toward me.
Yeah.
I just it it annoys me, and I know that's terrible. I don't want to be
Yeah.
like that, but I yeah, I don't want an emotional responsibility for other people. And I
Yeah.
know, as you said, that makes me sound really cold. I'd much rather have the duties. I think
Yeah.
that feels more doable for me. So I guess I feel differently in that way. But just that sort of neediness from other people, I've really been trying to work on that because I don't want to be that sort of
Yeah.
person. But I think what I've been writing about is I think it does trace back to
Yeah.
issues that I had with my mom
Yeah.
growing up. So I've been working through that.
Yeah.
I guess, how did you reconcile those things? Well, let's start with
Mhm. Yeah.
what made you decide to get a dog? Tell me
Yeah.
about the circumstances and how you came to get your dog, and the nice story of
Yeah.
getting him.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, and just for that, like the responsibility piece, it is interesting because I am at the same time eldest daughter, only girl in the family. I have two younger
Mm-hmm.
brothers. I think I've, like a lot of women, walked a fairly like kind of straight and narrow line in my life, at least to a certain point. And
Hmm.
it has maybe caused a bit of a backlash against like authority or a feeling like I have to do what that quote
Yeah,
unquote normal path is, which is interesting. So I do think certainly our upbringings and experiences inform these things, but it's just, I guess I
yeah.
felt like with this thing of like not wanting to have to like care for or like have responsibility to someone, yeah, it's interesting. And also
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry.
No.
I was just thinking, you and I have, sort of similar paths. We live abroad,
Yep.
at a great distance from our families, who I assume we both still love and care for and
Yeah.
like to spend time with when we can. But I feel like I have worked really hard, to be as independent and
Hmm.
responsibility free as I am. Um, in, not just moving abroad, but just building a life that I am
Yeah.
really happy with, in spite of what other people might think about the choices that I've made. And I assume, you have had similar experiences. So for those reasons, it feels important to protect, I guess,
Yeah.
that independence. So I think that's also part of my the adjustment I'm going through with
Yeah.
my dog who's taken away a lot of that independence. But
Totally. Absolutely. And I mean, one last point on the responsibility piece. I think it's different when it's not to imply my life is entirely free from responsibilities, but I don't really
mhm,
see or frame them that way because it, and maybe this is where the dog thing, there's some overlap here, but like when you explicitly choose something, for example, like I have certain responsibilities in my mind to like upkeep in my business and to my clients and like to be a woman of
mhm.
my word and whatnot. And yet like that's something I've explicitly chosen and designed for myself. Whereas I feel like it's something different when it's maybe like thrust upon me from the outside, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, so the dog thing, I mean, I grew up with we had golden retrievers growing up. I've always considered myself a dog person, and so our dog's 11 and we've had her just coming up on 10 years now. She was about 6 months old when we got her. And it's I sometimes again, there's no way of definitively knowing, but I am curious because if I'm 43 now and I got her 10 years ago, I would have been 33. And I wonder if there was perhaps like maybe a small maternal itch to be scratched, if you will, that
Mhm.
I was craving that led me to feel like at this point in my life, I would love to get a dog with my partner. And, you know, Chris and I, we moved in together after I think about, well, it was pretty much exactly a year living together. I felt like even though I had the desire sooner, I was like, let's just be practical and wait a year. Why not? And so I was probably for a year or two prior really pushing for us to get a dog. Now, Chris had not had they'd had cats, but had never had a dog growing up, and he was a little more wishy-washy on the thing, and you know, on the topic. And I remember getting to a point where I was just pretty much like, you know what, like we're just gonna do it. I kind of took the bull by the horns. I started looking for animals and whatnot, and we knew we wanted to get some sort of rescue or mix breed, and we had this opportunity to foster this dog, Shira. So basically, jointly, we said, okay, yeah, let's do it, but we're gonna do the foster thing first, which is a good way, you know, I recommend to anybody who's thinking about getting an animal if you can foster one or more animals. Now we had what they call a foster fail, which is i.e. you like you keep the dog, there's no giving back, but it is a good chance
Mm.
to see like how an animal might fit in your life. And it also can be great for people who maybe don't want the full-time responsibility to be sort of a carer for an animal for a period of transition for them, because a lot of rescue organizations don't have like physical places to keep animals.
Right,
This is
right.
why that and you probably know this, but just if anyone's listening, like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
how does the fostering fit? So, anyways, we had a chance to foster this dog, and I remember I liked her. We had a nice experience. We had a chance to take her for a few days, but it wasn't like this immediate fit for me where I was like, this is my animal. This is the dog I have to have. There were, and this sounds like really kind of superficial, but I suppose everybody gets an animal they think is like cute, but like aesthetically, she was maybe a bit different than what I had in mind. And it was fun and novel having her in the home. And but I remember it was a busy period for the couple of us, you know, work wise and just some other things going on. And the organization essentially like emailed or called and said, like, do you want to adopt her or not? Because we have another family who would then take her to foster to see if they want to adopt. And so I can still explicitly remember, I think it was a Friday, it was the end of a busy week. Chris and I met up for lunch during our busy schedules. Can still remember the restaurant we went to and we talked about, do we, you know, is this a dog or not? Or do we foster other dogs? Like, are we going to go with the first one we've tried, so to speak? It's not like buying a new mattress, but like kind of, right? And we were both very indecisive and there was no clear answer coming. So him or I said, like, let's just toss a coin and see where it lands. So of course, this was a Canadian nickel, which has a beaver on one side, the tails. So we decided tails is naturally the dog and heads is use your head, wait a little bit longer. Like you don't need to like jump at the first animal. And so we tossed the coin. I remember it landed on the sidewalk and it was tails. And listen, I think if it landed on heads, maybe we would have been like, okay, best out of three or something like that.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
kind of said, okay, like decision made. Now, what I can say is it, and I remember it was quite a period of time where I grappled and struggled with this new responsibility. And we can maybe talk about that in a moment. But
Mhm.
there was this really pervasive feeling for quite a long period where I thought, I know some people talk about a soul connection with an animal. And I would say I have a very deep connection with my dog now, but this was not immediate. I would say it's like the
Mm.
equivalent of the mom who believes they're gonna like fall immediately in love with their child the first time they look in their eyes. And I certainly know many mothers who've had that experience, but I also know the less talked about thing are the mothers that are like, who are you, alien creature, and where did you come
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
I now believe or feel, if you want to look at things on a cosmic level, that like this is the exact dog that I and we needed, and she's perfect for us and our family. But that was not the case at the time.
Mm.
So yeah, so that kind of leads up to like us getting the dog, which, like I say, was 10 years ago now.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you feel like you, in addition to, not being
Yeah,
sure if it was the
yeah,
dog, did you feel at the time like you were giving up some of the freedom that you had before?
yeah, yeah,
How did
absolutely.
that affect you when you first, I mean, 6 months is, probably potty trained
Yeah,
already, right? So that hard part is over, but it's still a very young dog. You still,
yeah,
requires a lot of your attention. So how did that
yeah,
change your life?
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. And I think, I guess, part of us really relishing our both of us, pardon me, our freedoms and like overall lack of responsibility. And similar to yourself and your Chris,
Mm.
my Chris and I, like we are very independent. And, it's not per se, I would say we do many things jointly, but there's not this feeling of like, I don't know, I don't want to say obligation because I think that there are like I don't see it that way, right? Like it's just not the
Mm.
way we operate. Even like he's gone for work right now and he said a lot of his colleagues will be like, "So have you like checked in and like called your wife or partner or whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, like I don't know, I've had a busy work day. Like maybe I'll text her." And like it's not that we don't talk when he's traveling for work, but like our communications are relatively minimal because we're both just busy and we know we'll see each
Right.
other in a few days, right? Which I know is different
Right.
than maybe the dynamic that some people have. So I think A, it was intentional that we adopted an older dog, and I will say she was a bit younger than what we had anticipated. We had hoped to get a 1 or 2 year old dog that was still quite young, but like you say, was potty trained. There wasn't going to be the crying through the night, the having to get up and go potty at like 2 in the morning. Like we knew we didn't want that. And again, I'm not sure like how much we really thought that we may have a child in the future, but I did know that if we were to have children, I wanted to have a dog first. And I've got a bit of a working theory I've developed through this getting a dog thing, which is that dogs either act as birth control or a gateway baby. And I will say that my dog was the former. She definitely served as birth control. So I absolutely can remember having this feeling of like, holy shit, until the day she dies, sort of thing. And it's not that I wanted my dog to die, but I can't tell you for how many months or maybe years that I would like, and even still, I sometimes have. And now that she's getting older, I'm actually struggling more, like quite a lot with her aging. But I
Mm.
still sometimes have these thoughts of like how much, especially when I have frustrations with her, like how much longer can she reasonably live? Which like this is not going
Yeah.
to be the podcast episode for everyone to listen to. Like it sounds like a really terrible thing, but I can distinctively remember we adopted her in October. We were living in Vancouver, which is where Chris and I had met, lived for a long time. Anyone who's lived on the west coast of Canada or the States will know when I tell you, like, it will rain the better part of the time from about October until like April or May. Like it rains, it wets, it's wet, it's cold, it's dark. And I can remember taking this dog out for walks 3 to 4 times a day in the rain, in the cold, and thinking, I can't believe I have to do this every single day for the next 10 to 15 years.
Hmm.
And I knew this was a responsibility of having a dog, but I just remember feeling like, holy moly, that's a really long time. And like, oh my
Yeah.
God, 3 to 4 times a day. And
Yeah.
I don't feel or have that kind of relationship with my dog anymore. But yeah, absolutely. Like it wasn't a surprise because I knew it, but there was that sort of heaviness of, oh man, this is just like a
Yeah.
long the sense of really whether I want to do this or not, I'm going to have to do it. And I wouldn't say there's that many things in my life that I've had that kind of relationship with that like
Yeah.
I do things because I want to typically, not because I have to, which I
Yeah.
realize is a privilege and also something I've intentionally designed.
With Annie, with our puppy,
Yeah.
first of all, I think it's important to note that Chris and I had a dog before, but we adopted
Yeah.
him as a stray. He was already old. He required almost no attention because, very sadly, he was traumatized and he
Mhm.
really didn't want attention or
Yeah.
cuddles or anything. He just kind of wanted to be left alone. So apart from dealing with his various illnesses, it didn't disrupt our lives in the same way that
Yeah.
having a young, healthy dog does. So we really intentionally were looking for a young dog when it
Hmm.
came time when we decided to go ahead and get another one. And we're looking for a long time. And I guess I was the one sort of pushing for a puppy rather than a 1-year-old dog.
Hmm.
And I think I was just incredibly naive or, blinded by the cuteness of puppies or
Yeah.
something because I know logically I knew that it would be hard work, but I just completely dismissed that.
Hmm.
And when I think back now, I don't know what I was thinking, what my thought process was.
Yeah.
Um, and so we occasionally would put in an application with a rescue group and just to see what would happen.
Hmm.
And one day I got a call for she was called Abra at the rescue group. And she was at the time, I think, 2 months old, maybe 11 weeks, something like that. And they said they did a long interview and then they said, can you come tomorrow to meet her? And if you want her, you can pay the deposit. And so it all happened really quickly. We went to
Mm.
see her. Of course, who doesn't love a puppy? And she was adorable and playful and cuddly. And, we thought nothing of the potty training and our nice house that I carefully decorated being destroyed by her. Didn't think about that at all. So we
Yeah.
paid the deposit, and a few days later, we brought her home. And my life turned completely upside, like almost instantly. I
Yeah.
started thinking, what did we do? What
Mm.
what did we do? Um, and anyone who's had a puppy will understand this, but everyone I've met on, taking her for walks and things,
Yeah.
everybody who has dogs will stop and coo over how cute she is. And when I say things like, oh, your dog's so calm. How old is he? And they'll
Yeah.
say, he's 4 or 5, whatever. Um, I'll say, oh, I'm counting the days until she's like that. And sometimes people will say, oh, I remember those days. Don't worry, it'll get better. And other
Yeah.
times they'll look at me really confused, like, oh, why would you be counting down the days? Cherish
Yeah.
every minute, basically. And I think that's probably a similar thing that mothers of
Absolutely.
children, of babies, will experience, right? That either they get consolation for
Hmm.
how hard it is to take care of a baby, or
Yeah.
they are sort of criticized or judged for complaining
Yeah.
or expressing how hard it is
Mm.
if they're brave enough to do that. So that's something that I've been thinking about, how, as you said, you think about how old your dog is, how much time you have left.
Hmm.
And I remember that feeling, as I've had a dog even before our last dog.
Hmm.
And, you grow so close. They're so special. I think, we were talking about different kinds of pets before we started recording,
Yeah.
but I think in my experience, dogs are so special and become a true member of your family. And
Hmm.
it is devastating when we lose them. I mean, I could cry right now thinking about a dog that I had that died in, 2015, 10 years ago. It still breaks my heart to think about her, about losing her. And so all of those emotions are sort of
Yeah.
tied up in this relationship. And I think that is sort of similar to having a human baby. You can draw comparisons at least, and
Yeah.
I want to be careful. I know it's not the same as a baby,
Yeah.
but one of the things I've been thinking about and I want your take on is
Hmm.
in the trenches of the puppy time, I've been thinking, okay, this dog is going to live hopefully 12 to 15 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. A parent is officially responsible for their child for 18 years. So I've been asking myself, what have I actually avoided by not having a baby? I
Yeah.
have all these years of responsibility, and I know it'll get easier logically, but right
Yeah.
now it feels like, you know, I I knew I didn't want to have a baby, so why did I get a dog?
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that? Or am I the only one who feels
Yeah,
like
no,
that?
I get it. Listen, I think, for myself, like reminding myself that it is a different thing, which of course we acknowledge it is. And even things like, and you may not be at this phase yet. Oh, and PS, like interestingly, having a 6-month-old dog, yes, she was potty trained, but I can say I remember like I had this great pair of like just simple black pumps that, when we used to wear high heels before everything was flats and sneakers when I was working in corporate and coming home and she'd like chewed just one of these shoes. And I'm like, could you not have eaten the pear? Because I replaced them. And then I'm like, no, I have three shoes. Like,
Yeah.
because one of them's been eaten. Um, so, I remember her, yeah, like, I think she was, I don't know, I think she'd lost her puppy teeth, but like really chewing through things and like having a lot of frustration. And our dog, people would like, oh, it gets easier. And I actually had to reflect on this last night when I was walking her around the block because I thought we spent, both myself and especially my husband, so much time training her and working with her. We've had a lot of issues with reactivity. She hasn't always been an easy dog to manage in a lot of ways. And I was thinking, like, now that she's 11, how, like, the brunt of that work, it's partly ongoing, but so much of it is behind us, and how hard that was and how long that was. I can say part of the challenge with having her at the very beginning was I was not in a great place mental health wise. I was dealing with like really severe anxiety, panic attacks. I think it was probably I want to say like in the second year after having her, where we were still dealing with a lot of reactivity stuff, I was off of the antidepressants I'd been on for a very long time. So I just had a really complex, frustrated relationship with her because I felt like her sort of behaviors often mirrored mine but would also trigger like a lot of anxiety in me. So I realize I haven't answered your question, but just a couple more reflections about some of those early days and how hard they were.
Yeah.
I will say to people, yeah, we have a dog, but we can leave our dog at home and go out without the police, like, social services coming. Like,
Yeah.
and again, you may not be in that phase right now. Like, um, I do have and can have relative peace. Like I still sometimes have frustrations where I'm like, damn it, like I just sat down to do something and now she needs to go out. And I get kind of frustrated about that. And I remind myself that I can have her as like my constant companion. And her needs are actually very few and far between relative to if I had a child at home right now who would be
Yeah.
like, she's relatively quiet, minus the fact like when we have like, UPS deliveries or something, she likes barking like crazy. So yeah, of course, and I know you know this, but like I would reinforce for myself, like there are still so many differences between what it would be to have a human child versus having this animal. And I do think, again, it gave me enough of a taste of maybe caring for and nurturing someone in something.
Hmm.
And I I'd be interested if we didn't have Shira anymore. This is her dog. How and if it would change the feeling with my husband, but I really felt like getting a dog made us, in my mind, feel like a true family.
Hmm.
I don't know if it improved my relationship with my husband, but like there was more a sense of like now we're a little family unit. We're no longer a couple. And so that's something that's been really nice.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think it was one of many factors that made it clear for me that I did not want the responsibility of a human child at all. And for a lot of people say like, "Oh, get a dog. As soon as you get a dog, you'll want to have a kid. You wait a year or two later." That definitely did not happen for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think maybe that's true for people who really want to have a baby.
Yeah.
Because for me, it has just clarified I do
Hmm.
not have the patience, the stamina,
Hmm.
the desire to have anything that is even more demanding of
Yeah.
my time and attention. But one thing that I have been thinking more about is like you said how pets or dogs might bring out maternal feelings.
Mm.
And definitely I felt that. It was funny, a couple years ago my sister got a puppy and I was visiting when she had it, and it was very young, very small, adorable. And I was holding it, and that was the first time in my life I have felt maternal urges. I think I've
Yeah.
held plenty of newborn babies, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, okay. But a little puppy, I was totally smitten. And maybe that's where my decision to have a puppy down the road came from. I don't know. Um, and definitely with Annie, when in the few minutes a day that she's calm and relaxed and is just cuddly and sweet, I do feel maternal toward her. And I am, it's just my nature constantly worried about her well-being and her health and,
Yeah.
did she poop yet? And
Totally.
is she eating? And does she like her new food? And all of those things. So that has sort of I guess I worry that people who see me acting maternal toward her are also thinking, "Oh, well, you're so maternal, you're such a great caregiver, you
Yeah.
make a great mom." Just as they did, when I was 13 and, changing my little sister's diapers, or,
Mm.
all those same sorts of judgments I think come out
Hmm.
when you behave in a certain way as a woman.
Yeah.
Um, and even knowing that, I've caught myself seeing my husband with Annie, cuddling Annie and talk. He adores her. He's so much more patient than I am. Um, and I catch myself thinking, oh, well, maybe he does want kids, or
Yeah.
maybe he like would make a great dad, and then I think, I don't want people thinking that about me. He said
Mm.
in very clear terms he doesn't want children. So
Yeah.
it's so unfair to make those judgments, but I can't help even thinking about it, about myself, about my husband.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I just want to point out it's interesting that we talk about like maternal, or we didn't use the term, but like paternal feelings, like rather
Hmm.
than like, why can't we just characterize this as like a sense of wanting to nurture? And that
Yeah.
being said, I sometimes make jokes like with my dog slash my husband being like, isn't it funny how I always say I'm child free? I'm like, and clearly you're my child. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm not one of those people who is like, oh, it's my fur baby, it's my child. But like at the same time, I feel like there is that very, yeah, and it's interesting. I say, isn't it funny we don't use the word nurturing, but it does feel more like a caring as like that parent figure, this maternal kind of desire. Now, the only thing I can think of, like in terms of how I maybe thought other people would view or regard me, is like with in context with my dog, is perhaps that like kind of like it's a sore or sad replacement for an actual child. Like they may see me like being a certain way and be like, why wouldn't if she just had a child? Like almost that like look at her
Yeah.
pretending her dog is a baby when it's not a
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
And P.S. not like pushing it around in a carriage with a bonnet on like some people and people do all kinds of things with their dog. It's interesting and maybe it's you know there's been long recognition that perhaps I don't, it's funny to say like I'm not mother material. I've always been very specifically with babies. I have had like a great desire in nurturing and like quite a wistful sort of, oh, this is precious. But I think for me, it's more like the recognition those become children. And for me, kids have never been like as easy for me to connect with, identify with, etc.
Mhm.
What I want to say is I haven't had many people, if at all, in my life say to me like, "Oh, but you would be a great mom." Even like one of my best friends, I can think she's often said to me, yeah, I wasn't really surprised that you didn't have kids, or like I could see that for you that you would choose a child-free path. If anything, people more see Chris as like the paternal figure. And I've had people be like, oh, even like his siblings, I thought you were going to be a father. I thought you wanted to be a father. And Chris is
Mhm.
like, I have never indicated that. But Chris gives off like major like dad or like amazing uncle vibes. Like
Mhm.
very he has a way about him that I think very few men have. And I gotta say, like when I see him with like babies, when I see him with our dog, when like I do have this feeling of like, oh my God, look at my man. And I will say, like, I try not to, and I've gotten a lot better both for myself as well as him and in general. Like, to not connect the dots to therefore I should have a child or I should have had a child. Like if I have a beautiful wistful moment with a new baby where I just think like look at this precious creature who has been totally untainted by this world and like not for
Mhm.
very long, right? The purity of like everything is so, there's such beautiful innocence. I remind myself I can have these feelings and I can just have these feelings. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to mean anything except for the feeling in itself. Like it doesn't have to dictate something.
I get it for sure. I feel exactly the same way. And when we first brought Annie home, it
Hmm.
was, I think we were like 1 week in and I was close to having a nervous breakdown. I
Yeah.
mean, I was just like sobbing in the car
Oh,
in the 1 hour I got to myself really to go grocery shopping.
yeah. Oh
And
man.
I I was thinking irrationally, really, like maybe Chris could take a leave of absence from work. Maybe I should think about bringing this dog back to the shelter, which is not something
I
I
was
would
gonna ask
ever,
if you thought of that. Yeah.
yeah, which I would never consider, because I don't want to burden a shelter with, another dog to adopt out. I admire their mission and, I
Yeah.
want to support it and help, not contribute to the
Yeah.
problems. Um, but I think I called my sister and the one who has children, and she was like, "Yeah, I totally understand. I know what you're going through." She was so supportive. And she said,
Mhm.
I remember after I had my first daughter and I had mastitis and my husband was away for a week and, it was just me and her and something else was wrong. I can't remember. And I thought, wow, I'm such an asshole. Like, that
Yeah.
is so much more serious than me, struggling to potty train a puppy, right?
Yeah.
I think I was so used to my life and my time being entirely my own. I really did resent her for taking all of that away, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then it got easier. And, what my sister said really put things in perspective for me. And I thought, okay, I can do this. I committed to this
Yeah.
and I'm going to see it through. I made this decision already, so it's too
Yeah.
late.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of something you might go through as a new parent,
Yeah.
when your life is totally turned upside down, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But for me, it definitely did make me think, wow, I could never deal
Yeah.
with having an actual baby. It would be too hard.
Yeah. I think it's good that you were able to put it in perspective for yourself and be like, okay, like it is, yes, it's a puppy and yes, it's trying, but it's also a period of time and it could be quote worse. And at the same time, I totally get that thing. Like even like watering my friend's plants the other day, I had this thought, like, what is wrong with you? Like this took like maximum 20 to 30 minutes out of your day.
Yeah.
Like it is not a big deal. Why is it's like, yeah, but I guess what I want to say is like then like feeling guilty or bad about something feeling harder than you feel like it
Mm,
should be doesn't help either. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Do pets ever come up as a consideration when you're speaking to your clients about the baby
Yeah.
question? Is that something that they
Yeah.
use to sort of gauge how they might feel about the
Yeah.
responsibility of children? Or, as you said, is it, sort of a gateway to babies?
It comes up, although I would love for it to be more of a talking point. And I've even thought about like, putting together like maybe some questions that you might ask, or like to have it sort of as like an inflection or reflection point for the decision. What I do hear from a lot of women, and specifically those who are leaning or ultimately choose child free, and I shouldn't say I don't hear this from people who choose to have kids, but this sense of like, having a dog like already consumes me in the sense that I think a lot of people recognize like their sensitivity, the sort of vulnerability of caring for something. And I would actually say like a lot of the child-free women that I know and that I've worked with through some of my like coaching support around becoming more confident in your choice, they feel like, oh my God, if I'm like this invested and become sort of like a crazy person about my pet, like I just can't imagine the monstrosity of having a human child. And you might say that people who choose not to have kids who have pets are like less tender and engaged with them than someone who might choose to have a child. But it would be interesting if it's like even more so that they sense this relationship of like being one of real connection and like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's just interesting. So I certainly would say I have people bring it up and say to me, like, I don't know how I could have kids if like having a dog feels so full on, or that I feel like, already like in certain ways, there's like such a connection that if like basically the sort of worry and anxiety that people have when they have a dog or another animal
Mm-hmm.
that they're not sure about carrying that forward. But I'm not sure if people see it as being like a similar or same thing. So I wouldn't say it comes up as much as I thought it might, but it's something that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation because I do
Mm-hmm.
think it can be like, I think a person should be reflecting. If you're on the fence about having kids and you have a dog, or for that matter, any other animal that you care for, thinking about what that has meant for your life. And if you want to have even more of those types of um, changes, like I think is important. And again, it's not the
Yeah.
same, but it could offer you some hints or clues.
Yeah. 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 I want to be careful that in spite of how much I've complained about how hard it's been to have a puppy, I am fully aware that it's not the same as having a baby.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it's so much more difficult, so much more responsibility, so much more important work.
Mm.
Um, but there has been a lot said in terms of, the falling birth rate and more women choosing not to have children.
Yeah.
There's been a lot written about how a lot of those young people have had pets instead,
Yeah.
had fur babies instead. So what
Hmm.
do you think about this idea that, our generation and younger are replacing quote unquote
Yeah.
babies with pets?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if and I'm trying to think, but I think there was even a study like somewhere maybe in like South America, or was it somewhere in Europe? And then basically looking at people sort of like emulating like almost like parent behaviors with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see some people being like, oh my God, like if you're gonna act like that, just have a human child. But I think like I think it's a beautiful, happy medium or in between maybe for a lot of people where you get this experience of having this incredible bond. And there's obviously a degree of responsibility. And for some people, it may feel like something either like adult to do or something that creates a sense of family or whatever it may be. I think animals, like, I know you're not in that place right now. And certainly animals are responsibility, but I feel like they bring perhaps a disproportionate amount of joy for the investment. Whereas I think and of course, I'm sure children bring a huge amount of joy for, I
Mm-hmm.
hope they do. I really hope they do for the parents because I know that there's a lot of challenges associated with that. But it's kind of like, I think people maybe look at their animal as like, look at the sort of quote unquote returns that I have of these like fun experiences and going out for hikes and having
Mm-hmm.
snuggles and I can like close the door and leave them at home. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like it, I wonder if it gives them enough of a taste of both sides, the good and the bad, to be like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's speaking of dogs.
A compromise. Yeah.
Sarah just said something.
Oh.
She agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it offers a sort of compromise because it's also less expensive, obviously,
Yeah.
than having a child, less responsibility, but still gives you, a lot of love in
Yeah.
return. So yeah, maybe it just works out as something easier, but still a good experience
Yeah.
generally. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
I want to, clarify that in spite of how much work Annie has been and how hard it was in the first couple weeks, I do adore her. I can't imagine, like now when I think about how I briefly wondered if I could bring her back to the rescue, it breaks my heart because, I wouldn't want to do that to her, to, put her through that back and forth, and I wouldn't want to not have her in my life now, but
Yeah.
it has been a whirlwind. And, I do look forward to the day that she is a little more easygoing and easier to, integrate into our lives rather
Yeah.
than disruptive.
Kind of things about child-free people that you don't want to like explicitly talk about publicly, but here I am anyways. But like, yeah, it's just funny to go back to that feeling at the beginning. Like there is really this feeling of I don't want to have this kind of like responsibility, or I don't want any more,
Yeah.
not even the responsibility piece is like I don't want anyone screwing up my awesome life, which is just not realistic if we're connected with
Hmm.
people and we love people and eventually we have to support and care for people. Like it comes
Yeah.
with it's a give and take. So yeah, that's something I'm working on.
Yeah, I guess it's something it makes sense though, because that's something that you have, decided that you
Yeah.
want from your life. And
Yeah.
obviously, you can't cut it out entirely unless you just live a totally solitary
Yeah.
existence. So you need to find a balance and reconcile those things.
It's no different than choosing to have kids or being child free in the sense that, like, can you hear my dog whining? She's like, I gotta go out now. And of course, like when the frustration starts, you're like, of course, she has needs. She can't do
Hmm.
it for herself. Like she's entirely dependent on me. And I think, reminding ourselves of like the situation these animals are in, even as far
Hmm.
as if we have frustration with them, I've seen these like Instagram reels and stuff being like, we essentially, yes, we've domesticated these animals, but we are asking them to do things that are entirely against their nature in many
Yeah.
cases, right? And
Yeah.
it's like to try and just have that empathy. But yeah, I guess what I want to say is like, it's complicated, right? It's like we can love these
Yeah.
animals and want them to like be by our side. I tell Shira, no, she has to live forever. And like, these funny like videos you see about people being like, I'm grieving my dog, and like my dog's 2 and like very healthy. But like this idea that they're just so precious to us. And we can also have frustrations and challenges. And I have no doubt that that's the experience of raising a human child. And frankly, that's sometimes
Hmm.
what it is to be child free, even without a dog, that there's parts
Yeah.
of it that don't always feel so good. And it's
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you just got to roll with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation and for
Thanks,
opening up
Monica.
and saying the things that we are ashamed to say sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I would say I'm a generally like very kind and thoughtful people in many ways, but I do sometimes have my moments where I'm like, why do I have to like be this person for my dog or for a friend or whatever. And it's like, I
Hmm.
don't know, maybe somebody will identify with that. And I'm trying to just have acceptance that like
Yeah.
we all bristle at things sometimes and feel uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
maybe a lot of us just don't say it. So there we go.
Well, yeah,
Sometimes I
we
don't like
hear,
being helpful.
yeah, a lot of times I think that's a criticism you hear of child-free people
Yeah.
that we're selfish. And I think, well, yeah, I am. I am
Yeah.
selfish, and I don't think I should feel bad about that. It's
Yeah.
my life.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Good luck with Annie.
Thank you.
Shira says hi through the dog universe.
Bad Mothers is written, produced, and edited by me, Monica Cardenas. I'd love it if you'd rate and review the show and get in touch with any feedback. You can find me on my Substack, and guess what? It's called Bad Mothers too.